Good morning, hello, and welcome to the channel. Whether you are a student exploring the world of audits and compliance, or a technology professional working to secure your system, or an expert trying to navigate complex risk landscape, or part of the management team aiming to build trust and resilience, this video is for you. Today, we will be diving into topics that's critical yet often misunderstood: service organizations control, or SOC. SOC. From SOC 1 to SOC 2, from financial assurance to cybersecurity accountability, SOC reports are not just checkboxes. They are blueprint for trust, transparency, and operational excellence. But here's the twist: implementing SOC doesn't have to be overwhelming. In this video, I'll break down the foundation of SOC, what it is, why it matters, and the type of reports available. We'll try to identify which SOC report fits your organization, whether you are a SaaS startup or a global financial processor. And most importantly, how you can adapt a practical, checklist driven approach to SOC implementation, which is quick, accurate, and efficient, no matter your organization's size. You will learn how to go from confusion to clarity, and from compliance intent to confident execution. We'll be using structured templates, proven frameworks, and use real world insights. So stay with me as we demystify the world of SOC step by step, control by control, turning theory into action and regulations into results. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because in this channel we are not just talking about compliance, we are making it work for you. Namaskaram. This is your host Savit Vittal Salian. Let's get started. Let's look at SOC 1 Type 1 report. This is a checklist for service provider. Let's start off with the checklist for scoping and planning. It starts off with determining the report objective. First is to confirm that your service really impacts the financial reporting of user entity, that's your client. Be sure on this, because this is a step which will determine the number of efforts, days, and hours that you are going to invest. You don't want to know about this at a later stage that you are not providing that service, because you would have wasted so much of time and energy. Hence, take as much as time possible. Get in your consultant, the experts who can really differentiate or can cut down and figure out if you are really providing these services, or if you are, then what part, so that your scoping is clear, the boundaries are set. So this is the most important thing, and this is where the senior management also can come in and have an oversight on whether this really requires you to go through the whole 9 yards of the work. Next is defining the scope. Once you are clear that your services impact the financial reporting of the user, then you start defining the scope. You identify which business process, which system, which application, what locations are in scope. Do not take a broad brush when you are doing this activity. Be very specific, be choosy, be absolutely sure that this is indeed part of the service that you are providing to your clients. Next is once you get your scope correct, the first is to get a sponsor, which is generally the most senior management. Do remember why? Because the report would not come to you, it would come to the senior management. It would be to the head of the department or a business head, maybe the CIO or CISO. Hence, the sponsorship should come from that level. So there is a full buy in the hierarchy. Prepare your core team. You would need your compliance team, operation team, IT, finance, risk team, controls team. Do note, this would be required because everyone that I listed are SMEs in the space, and in this you would need all the skills and experience that you can within your organization. If you find certain things are missing, look out for a vendor who can help you with this. Bring in an expert, bring in a consultant for the duration of the work that you intend to. There are quite a big organizations who specialize in this. You can bring them in, but do have an oversight. Next, you have to also engage an independent CPA, but that is later stages. But do have them engage early on so that they know what's coming and they can prepare accordingly. But smart enough activity would be to bring them in during the pre-work so that they can review, advise, provide you that consultancy perspective. So that once you are ready, you are really ready to go for the external audit, which will be used to report your compliance. Next is identify your sub-services, determine if third parties are involved in delivering services, decide on inclusive, and carve out the reporting model. But that's secondary. The first few steps are critical. Next is risk and control identification. Perform your risk based on the business that you have identified. Do your IT risk analysis on those specific assets and the scope. Be very clear on the scope. Create the objectives. This is a space where you completely give this handover to your risk heads who would put their team and do a complete independent risk assessment. And this is critical. If there is a risk anywhere, they should be able to pick up and inform and let you know about it. Because if you miss in this, you would end up putting a lot of investment of time and energy, and still there is a risk which the audit has found out. If such is the case, do remember when an audit report reflects an exception or a risk that you are not aware, it means that your risk team has not done what they are supposed to do. That's how I see it. Do remember, an auditor would come down for a very limited period, and within that limited period, if he is able to find a gap in your process, a risk in your process, whereas the team within your organization who lives and breathes your process is not able to, it's a big question mark on the risk team. Next is on documentation. Prepare the documentation in every aspect, at every step, no matter how small the documentation is or how small a topic, but a documentation helps. It's a way to demonstrate your design, it's a way to demonstrate how you go about doing your business in theory. Then you define your controls, how you implement to ensure that the process that you have defined is working. Then you go on defining your metrics under that controls. Define the threshold, define the KPIs, the KCIs, so that you know when there is an exception. List the controls the client must also implement. Generally, all that you have should automatically pass on to your client, unless there are certain things that the client is not performing. In addition, the controls should also include all that they do exclusively for you. And you have the right to define what those controls are going to be, what the metrics that the client is or your providers are supposed to provide to you. Next is using the inclusive method. Describe the relevant controls from your sub-service provider. If there is something which the provider has, and if the provider is matured, you might end up knowing certain things which you would otherwise not know, and you can include that in your process. From a readiness assessment perspective, which is actually pre-audit evaluation, conduct a readiness review, perform an internal or consultative led walkthrough of each control to confirm it's properly documented, designed effectively, and implemented at the time of review. Remediate design weakness or incomplete documentation. Do remember, this is pre-audit. So you are getting your house in order. Ensure that employee understand their responsibility in executing and documenting the controls. From an audit execution and evidence collection perspective, provide your system description, control metrics, organization chart, policies and procedures. Now do note, these are checklist items, non-negotiable, because these are something which you would be required to submit when an audit is declared to. You need to be ready. You can't prepare it at that point of time. If you say you have to prepare, it is a straight fail at that point of time itself. The auditors would be happy to close the audit, because if you don't have these with you when you start an audit, it indicates that you are running your shop blindfolded. So it's a good win for the auditor. They just close the audit as failed and move on. Next, since type 1 only tests design and existence, not operating effectiveness, gather screenshot, access logs, policy document, workflow record, organization charts. Now, what is a screenshot here talking about? Basically, in your design document, when you say users would do step 1, step 2, step 3, there should be a reference how step 1 looks like. This helps in visualizing. This would help the staff, generally the staff who's onboarding, who knows nothing on your system. He'll refer your document, look at the screenshot, understand the screens, and so that when he's executing his part of the role, he has a reference point. That's your documentation. That's your work instruction doc. That's the one which you will also give to the auditor when they start the audit, saying, oh, this is how I do run my shop. These are the things which are required to be. This is how it looks like. So that's the screenshot. Generally, it should be part of your process document or procedure document or work instruction document, but a document. You miss it, you would have challenges during your audit. Having said that, during an audit, you would be also have to prepare for interviews, walkthroughs to demonstrate and the control understanding and implementation, wherein you will have to explain all the steps once to the auditor to figure out how things are run on the ground. You have to give a hands-on experience to the auditor. Why? Because once the auditor understands how it is done, then they go, that's your planning stages. That's how the auditor is planning his strategy about how he'll go about in the field work stage, that's the phase 2. If you say there are 20 steps to perform a particular task, he'll understand what the 20 steps are. He'll look at your document to see whether you have mentioned the 20 steps, how clear your documentations are. Then he will ask you to show a sample. So you will take a sample and you will run through the 20 steps. But during that time, if you say if you find 25 steps, then your documentation is not correct. Or your steps are 15, whereas you said 20. Again, the documentation is not correct. But if it matches the way you have shown and on the document, so it is good, it's in line. Now the auditor will use that 20 steps, the same 20 steps with a different sample, and the auditor will do a test. Now do note, if your process requires 20 steps to achieve the objective, and while the auditor is performing, is not able to get the result in 20 steps, but it requires more steps or less steps, that's a deviation, not necessarily a negative deviation. But then he would come to you for explanation. The idea behind asking for you the explanation is to figure out, is the design different than what was proposed in the document? Is this a design issue? Or he has performed the 20 steps and the results are totally different from what is expected. Then the auditor is more or less confident that the design is a flaw, or there is something wrong in the way it has been performed. This is how an auditor would generally go about in his business. Once all the audit is over, then the auditor would give a draft. Now this is your last post. This is a last opportunity to review what's been defined by the auditor, his interpretation, his experience. He will put that into the draft. It's a draft. That's where you have opportunity to correct it if there are minor, but if there are major back and forth, possible, but very rare because the auditor would have done exactly the way you have said they are doing it. What's there in the document? So how come there could be a difference in opinion? Unless they have goofed up in their documentation, unless they have missed a step, unless they have given a wrong sample data. But then it also comes with caveats, mostly not in favor of the auditee. So do understand the importance of this space. A quick checklist. It starts off defining the scope, process, system, and third party involvement. Identify financial control objective and existing control. Do remember this is SOC 1 type 1. The next is prepare a detailed system description and CUECs. Then conduct readiness review and fix the design documentation gap. Then collect point in time evidence of control existence. Next, undergo auditor's walkthrough and submit management assertions. Finalize and distribute the SOC 1 type report, SOC 1 type 1 report securely. So that's the workflow for SOC 1 type 1 report for service provider. Hope this checklist helps you in your planning in some way. Let's now look at SOC 1 type 2 reports. The first one was SOC 1 type 1. This is SOC 1 type 2 report, a checklist format for service providers. Again, it starts with planning and scoping. The first step is similar. We confirm whether the organization really provides a service that impacts the client's financial reporting. Scoping is defining a system, process, location that affects the clients. Subservice, determine the third parties that would get impacted. Decide and carve out the specific. Do not boil the ocean. Do not go with a broad brush that anything and everything in this list is applicable. No, cull it those which are not applicable. Designate a project lead. Assemble a cross team. Engage a CPA firm. Qualified auditors who can help you before the audit starts, so that he can give a critical view on your processes. Second, risk assessment and control definition. Very similar to the earlier one. Identify the risk of financial reporting, errors, omission, frauds, unauthorized changes, etc. You can have an objective for your risk managers in their performances also. If an auditor finds a gap which the internal risk team has not, it directly impacts their performance. Go with a simple logic. How does an auditor finds gap in 15 days, 30 days or 60 days that they are provided this window, whereas the original risk team within the organization who's living and breathing 365 days in a year is not able to? How is that possible? It's a question mark on the skills and capabilities of the risk team. So have that clearly documented in these risk managers JDs, objectives. You just can't fail an audit, at least not for the scope that you are entitled to manage. Now, define the controls. Look at the controls. Ensure accuracy of financial transaction process. How do you manage that? Document current controls addressing the objective, including control owner, frequency, system tool, and etc. The whole 9 yards. Next is documentation of the systems. We discussed this. Develop a comprehensive write-up including service provided, infrastructure application used, control environment, sub-service organization relationship, complementary user entity controls, etc. Define each control, each objective, each description, control owner, frequency, and reference documents. Identify the client-side controls required to ensure effectiveness of the services. From a readiness assessment and gap remediation perspective, conduct a mock audit. Now this is highly recommended. Make it mandatory in fact. Perform an audit before the audit. Do this because this will open a Pandora's box in many cases if things are not running as structured. If you have slight of doubt, recommended to do a mock audit. In fact, get an external auditor to perform the mock audit because you want the professionals to do the job. Because do remember, an external auditor coming for the full audit would have no discount for you. He has to do a job which he's been assigned to and he would be really good at it. So your mock should be even better. So get a professional if you don't have within your organization. It's worth every rupee. Fix control design flaws from the mock audit and test. Fix the missing document procedures. Find the gaps in your documentation. Next important one is educate control performers, evidence collector on the process of execution and documentation required. Basically, it is staff training. Anyone who is associated with the process managing this need to be trained. If they are not, invest in their training. It works magic. From a control operation over third party audit, maintain evidence throughout the period, collect, store, timestamp the evidence. Now, if it is the management thought process is for the audit, then you are on the wrong path. It shouldn't be just for audit, it should be as BAU. So when an audit comes, no matter how big or how complex it is, you are not creating anything specific for the audit, but you are showing them the BAU. That gives confidence to the auditor that you are doing a BAU and nothing which is very unique and specific for the audit. That's the assurance that auditors are looking out for. Follow the control process frequency that you would have defined. You should be able to demonstrate that you are doing evidences or something which would be required to demonstrate. Do not, the auditor will trust you, but the duty is also to verify. So trust, yes, given, but verification is something that they will have to do to ensure that the trust is maintained. Now, evidence need to be centrally stored. Again, not for the audit, but as part of your process. If you are generating daily report, weekly report, that should be there in a repository. And if it is so, then you did not have to share each details. You can just point the auditors to the repository and the auditor would do what they are supposed to do. But are you confident enough that you can share it? Now that would come from whether you are sure that the processes are being followed. So it's a cycle. Next is control testing and auditors collaboration. Provide system description, control metrics, evidence, and so on and so forth. Be prepared for sample based testing. The auditor would ask for a sample based testing. The best way is where the full data in every possible combination is already available centrally and you can point it to the repository. An auditor can do their sampling. 1, 10, 5% of the total. Leave it for the auditor to decide. But if you're not maintaining the centralized form of storing the data across your controls, then it's a workload for you. Because auditor would say, give me 20 samples with these 50 parameters. And during the audit, it's time bound. So you would have to cut down from your current BAU team to generate those. It's time consuming, frustrating, and you would be directly impacting your operations. You can avoid this by having a structure where the information are centrally available and available for the auditor and they can do n number of testing that they want. If you have the structure in place, the conversation is so easy. During the start of the audit, you can just share the repository and say, here is a repository, do what you want, do your testing, it's open for you. Then auditor will still come in if they have clarification or things are not matching, but that time won't be a place wherein they ask for evidence because you have shown them the storage itself, the vault. But to show that there should be confidence in the management in your processes. Are you having that confidence? Think through. If not, what is required? How can you get that? Next is reporting and remediation. In the reporting, they will issue a formal management statement asserting the accuracy of the system and so on and so forth. But this is after the audit is over. Of course, you will get a draft report, you can validate it, review it, can go back and forth on the fine tuning on the wordings to reflect the right state. Next is post audit and continuous improvement. Lesson learned. As part of the process, you would need to have the output of the report, audit report, in your monthly meetings. One is immediate review, assigning responsibilities, accountabilities for each of the deliveries that is expected. Overall accountability will be to the person who the audit report is assigned to. You would have to build up a team to ensure that we quickly fix the gaps that has been identified, if there are gaps identified. Before that, you will also have to have accountability mapped out. Which team or who was accountable for running that specific gap that was identified. The messages should be hard and strong, but that's important because you are running a shop. You had assigned a team, you had assigned a group to manage it, and obviously if there is a finding, someone did not do what they are supposed to do. So the accountability needs to be fixed, and then assign accountability either to a new team or a new person to drive to closure. A good management would also penalize underperformers, in this case people who have not performed, hence you are holding a negative report with your hand. And of course reward those where it has come out well, which means people have been doing what they're supposed to be doing and you believe that they are doing the job. Let's look at a flow. It starts with defining the scope and engaging the auditors, identifying financial reporting risk and control objectives, documenting systems, controls, CUEC and sub-service involvement, conducting readiness review and close gaps, collecting evidence throughout the audit period, undergoing auditors testing and submitting management assertions, finalizing reports and distribute it securely, then execute remediation and prepare for the next cycle. So this is the workflow. You take a screenshot of this and plan out how you would manage, who would manage at what level. Let's look at some sample evidence types for type 2 audits. Access reviews, sign off emails, screenshots, access logs, log role report. This would be part of the evidences that would be generally checked by the auditor under the access review control. Under change management, they will look at change ticket, approval workflows, test results, rollback plan, documentation. They will look at samples of changes in different categories if you have different categories of change records. They look at the change description, who approved it, are they the right mapping. In that they will look at the metrics. Who approved? Are they part of the metrics or someone else has come in and approved on behalf? Is it the same person who has raised this has approved it, or is there a maker and checker concept within your system? They will look at what was committed as a change and what was delivered. How do you know what was delivered is what was committed? Were there any deviation? If there was deviation, was it recorded? If there was deviation, who approved it? That comes into change management. Under reconciliation, they will look at the reconciliation report, the sign-offs, the exception logs. Under data processing, they will look at system log showing batch, success, failure, data validation log. Log is a deep subject. At theory, anything and everything that a system is undergoing, whether it is systems, internal, or someone is executing something, should be recorded, and it is done in a log in a secure way so that there is no possibility of manipulation or backdoor entry. In an audit, it can be reviewed. The discretion is with the auditor as to how deep he wants to go or what part he wants to look at. The question is, are you doing it? It's generally found logs are reviewed only in back of an incident when there is an investigation to be done, not as proactively or a sample-based review been done irrespective of the incident or not. If your situation in your organization is wherein you do a log review on back of an incident, you lost the game long time back. If you have a system which proactively reviews the logs, sends you an alert in case of an exception found, you have won the game. Which side of the fence are you in? Are you in between somewhere? Mostly people, organization do it on back of an incident. Mostly. After real penalties and censures by regulators, auditors, stakeholders, you might have matured or started in the journey of maturity of having some logs been proactively reviewed. Really advanced management with a good thought process and long vision would have a system in place which would do proactive analysis on the logs and help you arrive at conclusions, decisions way ahead in the game. Very few. But eventually, most would have to fall in line. Incident response. How are incident managed? Incident tickets, timeline of event, post-incident review, communication logs, etc. These are something which would be evidenced and you might require to keep those in place. Hope this checklist helps you in your planning and strategy. Let's now look at SOC 2 Type 1 report. We covered the SOC 1 Type 1 and SOC 1 Type 2. Now we are in SOC 2 Type 1. It's a checklist for service providers. So the purpose is to validate that controls relevant to the security are designed appropriately and implemented as of a specific point in time. What it means is you have defined a control, you have defined your objectives, you have a design in place. You claim to have a design in place and you also have claimed that you have controls in place which ensures that the design is working. This type 1 report of SOC 2 is there to validate your claim. Let's start off with planning. It starts off with the confirming the business drivers, client trust, vendor requirement, compliance for obtaining the SOC 2 type report. Defining again the scope. First is, are you providing the service? Second, what part of your infra, systems, process support those services? Then you look at your criteria, which is security, which is mandatory, then availability, confidentiality, processing integrity, privacy. Then you form a project team. You get representative for all the relevant teams within the organization. Your IT team, your security team, your compliance, your HR, your DevOps, your legal, or any other who are supporting this infra on this business. Then you engage a TPA firm and experience SOC 2 for SME for attestation. Then comes your risk assessment, wherein you identify the business risk to the client. Then you define what each control is meant to achieve. Then you align your existing security and privacy control to the selected TSC. Again, this is a place where I mentioned earlier multiple times. Do not invent or reinvent the wheel. The idea is to reuse what is currently there and only design new if it is not available or not working or not fit for purpose. Then only go for creating new. Reuse is always the recommended approach. Then we go for documentation. It's about draft a detailed overview of service, system, components, infrastructure, application, people, their processes, sub-service organization, data flow and boundaries. These are key because this helps in defining the scope also. You miss this out and then you might just go all over the place. It's a rabbit hole if this is not defined clearly. For each control, document their objective, their design, the control owner, frequency, system. So how do you look at it? You look at take a process document for a particular process or a sub-process. Check out whether the objective is clear on that process. Are the designs clearly documented? Are the control owners? Are the frequency for review? Are the systems and the tools defined within that document? Hence, it's a wholesome document. Or are you pointing it to some other document? Then it is a loop. So the idea of a documentation is it should be complete in itself, at least near completion. The objective is to provide that one document for an auditor for a particular process, or a comprehensive workbook which answers most of the question, if not all. That should be your thought process when you are designing your document. What is any person can come and ask? How can we ensure that he is not coming to you because it's already answered in the book, in the document? Is it possible? The starting position is no, that's not possible. But any matured organization, long enough in the industry, would know it is very much possible. It's just that you have not put the right person or teams in place. So it's a maturity model. You evolve over a period of time, and then you have a comprehensive document. Look at any old organizations that is there that you can access to. Take for matter the power sector or the railways. One of the best documentations that you can see are in these organizations, because these are there for hundreds of years. So they would have evolved their documentation process. Yes, it is outside of the technology space, but we can learn a lot from them. Next is list the controls your customers are expected to implement for overall effectiveness. Are there controls? What are the controls? How the control should look like? That is something that a thought process should be put up. If you are relying on cloud or third parties, define whether you use the carve out or inclusive method. Describe their control environment. You need to be sensitive to this and careful. Next is control design review and readiness. Again, very similar to the past. Conduct mock reviews. Make the mock reviews much more robust than the actual audit. That helps your cause. Address the deficiency that you find in the mock through the mock drill. Look at the workflow, refine, define, approval process in the workflow are critical, super sensitive. Check out for gaps in those. Ensure control owners understand how to perform and document their responsibilities. A clear matrix, a clear RACI goes a long way in mapping the accountability, the responsibility for the teams and people. Evidence collection and audit preparation. Since this is a type 1 report, do remember this is type 1 report. Collect evidence showing control exists and are configured correctly on the audit date. Example including screenshot of access control system settings, sample policy document, firewall configuration, logs of SIEM. We discussed this in detail in earlier examples. Structure your control documentation and evidence by TSC category for each audit review. Prepare subject matter experts to explain control implementation. You need experts when you're dealing with auditors. If you don't have an expert, the conversation will go longer and it can go all over the place. The auditors, do remember, are coming with a very limited time period. Hence, the response and things need to be to the point. If you don't have an expert in that place, it can go all over. And do remember, the auditor has a final say in the audit report. If he has not understood, if it is not clear, it's going to get reflected in your report, and the report will be something which you are going to hold for a very long period. And if it is negative, unfortunate, and that is because the interpretation by the there was no SME for explaining it correctly in the right order, you are holding the penalty, not the auditor. So how would you like that to be? How would you like to have a situation wherein you are having the right person, and SME explains clearly the concept, the principles, the details to the auditor, and auditor understands it and it gets reflected accordingly in the report? That's a good state to be in. Draft a formal statement asserting that controls are fairly described and implemented as of the audit date. You need a good report. So put your best foot forward, get your SMEs do the job. They are SMEs. This is the time to prove they are. Submit all the documents that the auditor is asking within the time that was agreed to. Review the draft report carefully. Do not delegate this. This is the place where the management jumps in. Address the comments which are there. This is the time when the management comes. Hence, it is senior management and the senior leadership. Especially the head which would be holding the report. The report would be on his name, on her name. Once all is done, then the report need to be shared. It's a good thing if your report is positive, but it's a challenge if there are serious findings, because by rule you will have to release this report to your stakeholder to let them know, or worst case scenario your stakeholder has asked you to conduct review, or even worse, stakeholder has asked and he has triggered the audit and the auditors would report those things back to them directly. Hence you want to put your best foot forward. Let's look at the flow on the checklist. So this is SOC 2 type 1. Starts off with determining the scope and relevant TSCs. Security in this case is mandatory. Perform risk and control mapping to TSCs. Document system description and detailed control design. Then conduct readiness assessment and fix the design gap. Then collect point in time evidence of control implementation. Undergo auditors walkthrough and interviews. Review and finalize the report. Submit management assertion. And then distribute the report to authorized stakeholders. Hope this workflow gives you a clarity on thought as to how things will move, how it will flow, and what is your role in each. Use the checklist that I discussed earlier, build on it, rebuild on it, make it pass through at least 2 reviews so that the SMEs have their point inserted there. Make the SMEs understand that if the report is not favorable, there would be an investigation on which part of the process failed, and generally the process leads would be the SMEs and they would have a say there. Hence, you have to ensure the SMEs understand the consequences of this. Example of control categories. From a logical access perspective is MFA, RBAC, user provision. You have to get your ID and access management team here. System operation, you need the logging team or monitoring team, the tools team. From a change management, you need the approval team. You need to have the rollback procedures, document to be shown. Incident response, you need the breach reporting workflow, the triage plan, how you manage your incident management process. Your physical, you need the badge access, you need all the physical process, access process, visitor log mechanism, how you manage it out, how do you define secure zone, how do you ensure the zones are secure. From a risk management, you need the whole 9 yards of risk management, wherein how do you perform risk assessment, how do you track risk assessment, how do you identify gaps, how do you have metrics, what do you do with the metrics, how do you define thresholds, what are your risk appetite, what are your current risk landscape, how are you ensuring that risks are tracked for mitigation. So you have to give that whole story to the audit, and this starts way before even the audit conversations are started, which means it's part of your BAU. Think through, is it part of your BAU today? If not, what's your plan? How do you plan to make this a BAU? Now let's look at SOC 2 type 2 report. Do remember, it is SOC 2 type 2 and it's a checklist for service providers. The purpose is to demonstrate that your organization's controls for security, optionally availability, confidentiality, processor integrity, and privacy are not only well designed but have been operating effectively, and that to over a specific period of time. That specific is a audit period, but the best practice says it should be part of your BAU, not specific period, across the lifespan. So from a planning perspective, it's defined, starts with same, common, define the purpose. In this case, the review period could be 6 months to 12 months generally. Minimum, it should have security, optional availability, confidentiality, processing, integrity, and privacy. But my recommendation is keep everything as minimum, nothing optional, because you never know what is being asked. And this should be part of a BAU, so this should be available with you. That's the basic expectation. Defining the scope, the systems, the services, components very clearly articulated. That's requirement. If not, that's a good place to start with. Identify your leads, your teams, and engage a CPA or an auditor who can do help with your pre-planning. Next is conducting risk assessment, that is evaluating the risk to client's confidentiality, service uptime, and system integrity. List the objectives. Align each control to the corresponding TSC principles. Next is documentation. We discussed this. Document anything and everything in your process as much as possible. List out your process and look at the documentation. That's how you go with it. Assign, bring in specialists, group of people who can do it for you one time, and then have a team which can update, or a mechanism, if it is possible, a workflow wherein any change in the process triggers an update into the process document. There will be teams which would update it, technical as well as non-technical. There will be teams or people who would be reviewing and approving, generally the heads or the process leads. Make it mandatory and at a fixed cycle. Quarterly recommended, half yearly, worst case scenario. Do note, a process might have no changes in 3 months. So be it, but you have reviewed it. It could be a workflow, it could be a general workflow. If there is no change, so be it, but get it recorded. That's a good habit to start off with. It gives you confidence that your reviews are 4 times in a year. Think through about it. It's not an overhead, it's a form of assurance. Next is conduct a readiness assessment. Assess whether the controls are implemented and can be evidenced any given point of time. It's time to look at logs, find out if there are logs generated. If they are generated, are they moving to the right storage area? If they are in the right storage area, are they being accessed by the authorized person? Who has access? How do you know it has not been unauthorizedly accessed? Do you have a mechanism in place? Is there a document? Is there an undocumented change? So that's a full 9 yards of work that you will have to do. Ensure stakeholders understand their role, especially the people who own the process, sub-process, engagement leads, process lead, business leads. They need to know what their roles are. Careful, check out when you're having the discussion or review, is it been sub-delegated? How it has been sub-delegated? Sometimes the process owner is 4 levels above, conveniently delegated to the last person on the ground. They'll have a role, but you just can't do this. Do note, do remember who this audit report would belong to, whose neck is on the block. So there is an accountability and there is a responsibility. Accountability lies with the top, responsibility can be shared sometimes, but you have to be careful who it has been assigned to, or the responsibility. Does he understand the impact of him performing or not performing? Can he really do it? Generally the failure happens here. You delegated someone has moved long time back and he's not even aware of it, or he started once and then he was busy with other BAU because he's last guy on the line. Everyone from the top has assigned it and the time has run out more than 100%. Who pays the penalty? Collect the evidence, keep the evidence. This is what we discussed earlier. If you're collecting for the audit, you have lost the game. If it is part of your BAU already there, you have won it. Which side of the fence you are? So using a centralized inventory helps, a repository helps. If you have a process which reviews those evidences at a set frequency, half yearly, annually, quarterly, it helps to ensure that there are no surprises. There are cases where we believe there are logs. We believe a system is sending its logs or generating its log. On investigation, we found that the system configuration changed and the log part is taken off for some reason or just not working. So system is not generating the log. Next condition, system is generating the log but it doesn't know where to send. Third condition, system is generating the log. It knows where it is to send but the destination is no more there. Next condition, the system generates the log, knows where it is to send, sends it to the destination stores it, but it deletes it every day, every week, monthly, and doesn't have any archiving method. So you have lost. The moment it archives, if it is archiving, good, but if it is just deleting it, cleaning it off, overwriting it, no use of such a log. At least when your review is 12 months. What's your position? First of all, what is your log policy, log management process? What is the rule that you have defined on log management? Do you have a rule? Supporting audit. Do remember, auditors are there because you invited them or your stakeholders invited them, and you are bringing auditors to test, to ensure that all that you have claimed is working. It's a way to build in confidence within and outside. It's not a burden, it's a requirement. So we need to support them. We have to provide auditors the required document, control matrix, execution, the whole 9 yards, because we invited them. It's for our own purpose, for our own survival in most cases. You invite and you don't provide them. How are they supposed to do what they are supposed to do? So you have to be cognizant of this fact on who the auditors are, why are they there, and your contribution to it. And if you don't contribute, what's the risk that you are holding? Next is report finalization and distribution. Start off with management assertion letter, provides a formal attestation that controls were designed and operated as described or not operating. Validate the system description, controls, result, exceptions, and this is a place where all that auditor has seen, found, experience would be shared. You don't agree or you agree with it. Auditor has the final say. Yes, auditor would be reasonable if there has been factual inaccuracies in his interpretation despite clarity being given. But if you are explaining to an auditor first time in a report, you have lost the game. These discussions happen during the audit, not when the report comes in. If that is the case, if you observe that the leads or the SMEs are explaining to the auditor during an audit report, which means the SMEs and the leads have not been engaging with the auditor in the right spirit and context. Result, you have an audit report which is deeply flawed, but from an auditor perspective, that's what he has seen. So if you have a lot of complaints as a management, if you see a lot of complaints coming from your SMEs that the report is flawed, the question the management should ask the leads and the SMEs are, was this not discussed during your flow? The auditor would be very clear because he would record every conversation every minute. It's the SMEs who would generally not be supportive in many cases. Matured organizations are very sensitive and careful when dealing with audits. Next, post-audit activities. Once the findings are in, you have to address the gaps, you have to identify the gaps which has been put up, the actions that would require to fix the gap, put out a project plan, and run it as a campaign to mitigate it. To remember, an audit report of this nature are provided to regulators, provided to stakeholders, which means if the reports are not good as findings, you are creating anxiety with your regulators, with your stakeholders, your business partners. Hence, it's your duty for survival, of course, that you fix those out quickly so that you can inform that yes, there was a gap and here we have fixed it, so you can reduce or remove the anxiety off. Let's look at the workflow. It starts off with defining the scope, audit period, and TSC coverage. Documents, systems, and define controls. Next is conducting readiness review and fixing the gap. Next, collect evidence throughout the review period. Then it participates in audit walkthrough and testing. Then review and finalize the report and implement remediation and prepare for continuous compliance post audit report is released. From a checklist perspective, access control, we discussed this. Bring in your SMEs on identity access management team. Change management, bring your change management team. Backup team, bring in your backup team on this aspect of it. These are all SMEs that you would need. Monitoring, you bring on your monitoring team, your security team. So you would have a general monitoring team which monitors all the assets as such for the BAU, and you have a security monitoring team. You need to bring both of them into this. Vendor management team, training, of course, you will have to see what the training plans, how they are for this specific piece of work. You have to bring in your privacy experts when you're dealing with it, because from an evidence perspective, all of these would be required, not just during the audit, as part of your BAU. So this helps you structure the process. Let's look at a comparative table between SOC 1 type 1 type 2, SOC 2 type 1 type 2. I would recommend teams to pause the screen and take a screenshot, or you can pause it and read it through. At the very top, from a purpose perspective, SOC 1 purpose, SOC 1 type 1, it is design, and it's the accessing, it's about looking at your design and implementation of controls to financial reporting. Type 2 is assess the design and operating effectiveness. It is first is design review, second is operating review. Same. Type 1, SOC 2 is design review. Type 2 is operating effectiveness. Design, operation. Okay. Design, what is that you claim is your process. Operating, what you actually do. What you do, does it match with your design, or are you way different? The standards are defined. Control focus is internal controls for SOC 1 type 1. For SOC 1 type 2, it is operating testing over the period. Do remember, SOC 1 is internal controls or finances. SOC 2 is controls on security. Review period, generally keep it from 6 to 12 months, once in a year at least. Testings are performed on design for type 1, whether it's SOC 1 or SOC 2. It's design of controls. SOC 2, whether it's type 1 or type 2, it is always operating effectiveness in comparison to the design. You said this is the path that I take to perform my duty, and then you show that you actually take that path. That's your operating effectiveness. SOC 1 type 1, your audience is internal auditor. For rest, you have external stakeholders, partners, and so on. SOC 1 type 1 is for internal auditors. Everything requires documentation. Testing requires documentation, logs, everything has to be on paper, evidence on paper. Different level of complexities, but that's not under top priority. As you go through it, you will realize that almost all are equally difficult if you don't have processes and design properly, or it could be easy if you have things in place, if it is automated. Hope this comparative table helps with a better perspective when you look at from the top. SOC 1 type 1 type 2, SOC 2 type 1 type 2. So at the top, in summary, SOC 1 focuses on financial reporting, SOC 2 focuses on data protection, system security, and privacy. Type 1 is design only, type 2 is design plus operation. When you say design only, it demonstrates control exists and are properly described. You have evidence within the documentation saying this is how it should look like. Design and operation, it demonstrates the control works as intended over a time. In your case, take it as BAU. Hence, in conclusion, Service Organization Control or SOC reports have become an industry standard for evaluating and demonstrating internal control effectiveness, particularly in a cloud-first data-driven economy. SOC 1 and SOC 2 reports cater to distinct yet critical domain, which is financial reporting and trust service principle respectively. Organizations adapting SOC framework demonstrate a proactive stance towards compliance, risk mitigation, and client assurance. While implementation can be demanding, the benefits in the form of trust, market access, and operational discipline far outweighs the challenge. As business evolves, so will assurance needs. SOC reports are expected to grow into more dynamic, integrated, and continuous form of attestation, aligned with the broader goal of digital trust and operational resilience. With this, we come to the end of this series. I hope you found some value in this. I wish all the students best of luck when you're dealing with SOC. It's a great experience if you have an opportunity. Run with the flow. For risk managers and the controls team, I wish you all the luck again. It's a difficult space because the checklists are humongous. If you come across someone saying it's an easy space, you can conclude that the person doesn't know the topic well. It's a difficult space because you have to cover multiple aspects as I have demonstrated. Do also note my videos are indicative. The checklist are, I would say, a start point. You have to build on it and build not just similar to what you have from some other companies or organization. You have to customize it according to your organization's need, your organization design. Again, behave like an auditor when you are doing an internal review. You trust, but you have to verify because the auditor is going to do that. You have to think from what if it doesn't work? How do you know it is working? The how do you know will help you get to the real ground realities. So, again, let me thank you for staying with me for so long. Your time is much appreciated. I wish all the students, risk managers, controls teams, specialists, senior management who would be requiring to manage the SOC certifications uh, this year or in future. It's a difficult task, lot of effort, but my best wishes to you again. With this, I would like to close up this video, thanking you for your time. This is your host, Savit Vittal Salian. Namaskaram.